Doing something for the first time is wild. And when you think of the outdoors, it's inherently wild. I think the most important thing for me is sharing an activity, sharing what I love with people that have not experienced that or have some kind of barrier related to it. The magic of being able to create that bond, that connection with an activity, a person, a place, that's special.
Right. Right.
Well, welcome
Crickets.
in. Yeah, welcome in. Marcus and Derek hanging out here with Sincerely Yours Outdoors podcast. Super excited to have our guest here today. Really looking forward to a candid conversation that we're going to have today around identity, climbing, and being outdoors. So we're going to pass it over to Elisa. We're going to let her introduce herself in the fashion she sees best fit. But we're really looking forward to a great conversation today around her experience and a lot of cool things that she's doing in the film world, but also here in Pittsburgh that I'm sure is going to inspire the next generation of climbers. So, Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cool. Well, my name's Elisa. I'm 25 years old. I'm from Pittsburgh. My mom is from Costa Rica. My dad's from Pittsburgh. And right now, I'm on this journey, this life path, trying to figure out next steps, but, combining climbing with my passion for building community.
Yeah, for sure. So, tell us a little bit about your childhood. You're bicultural. You're sitting with two bicultural individuals as well. So, we'd love to hear how that impacted and influenced your life.
Yeah, so I feel like my bicultural childhood has been one of the most valuable aspects of who I am. But I think it goes like both ways. I don't know if you feel this as well. But I think it's something that has brought me a lot of like joy, but also like a sense of confusion
Hmm.
and not really knowing like where I fit and how I like move in different spaces. But so it's like it's a journey, I feel like. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Derek, yeah, chime in. I mean, from my end, growing up, it was definitely an interesting route and journey as well, with our father being African American, our mother being white, and the experience was about the same. Like, do we belong in this play in this space? How do we recreate? How we commune and identify with individuals that we were like recreating aside and apart from, but still holding that same space and value. Um, so yeah, I think it was a constant journey of like self identity and self fulfillment, but also charting a journey to hopefully empower the next generation similar to what you're doing. So, Derek, what do you?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of the same sentiment that you're mentioning and alluding to as well. I mean, in many of the spaces recreationally, growing up, a lot of the times we were moving communally, um, from an exterior, so to speak, like being part of a community by means of just participating, but feeling as though we're moving adjacently, moving alongside, as opposed to being in center and present within a respective community. So I can largely agree, and like can ascribe to some of the sentiments that you've kind of alluded to, but knowing there's value and space and place within being who you are, and not um, feeling as though you have to be a culture add or a culture shift, but just being you, because there's space for that as well, within the space in which you're operating and working in, especially as it pertains to like wellness, and recreation. That should be a safe haven. I mean, frankly, and admittedly for
Mhm.
everyone to feel as though they can be themselves in those spaces. That's what we, and I know you as well, are strongly advocating for as well. So largely agree. Largely agree.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about how being Latina, language and culture has like shaped you. And it's kind of interesting just based off of our trip so far today with seeing the Latinx population and one, just the welcomeness for us to be invited into a space and to communicate, but also just the community that we were sensing from the external while we were at Ascend and climbing of empowerment within the group and representation, but also the language. So, how has that shaped your life and the importance of that within the spaces you hold?
I feel like lately, well, the past year. So I just got back from Colombia. I was there for a year. I had a Fulbright scholarship. And during my time abroad, I really came to view language in a whole different sense. I think what's interesting is so my mom's from Costa Rica, and what's funny is I'm the first of three children. And so my mom told me that when I was in kindergarten, the teacher was like, Elisa's English isn't maybe where it should be. And so, honestly, in a way, I heard a lot more Spanish when I was young. And then, through time, my brother and sister came along, and, you know, there was a lot more English. And so, English is my first language. And Spanish, before, like up until a year ago, I felt very like self-conscious with my
Mm,
Spanish, and I think I realized like language and culture for me like go together. So like language and being a Latina, for me personally, I feel like it goes together. And I felt like not being able to speak Spanish like fluently as I do in English made me feel like I couldn't say I'm Latina.
mm,
And I think it's interesting because I've had friends who are also, Latinx, and they've expressed this as well, how, the Spanish language makes like if you don't speak it, they feel like they're not part of this community.
mm,
And I think it's very complex in the US because the Latinx population is so different and the realities are so different because you might have an like for example my mom, she came over to the US. And so you have people from Latin America, but then you have people who might have both of their parents are from Latin America. Or you might have someone like me, then you might have like second, third generation, and everyone's level of Spanish is different.
mhm,
And so I've just noticed like that's something so closely related to identity. And when I went to Colombia, it just reinforced that. Like you can speak a language, but then there's a whole other level of like being able to really connect with the language instead of just like speaking the words. So I've just seen that language and culture is so closely related.
yeah. It was awesome for me to be able to experience you in that moment when when we took the students from Environmental Charter High School to visit you, and then the two Latinx students that came up to you, and I saw just visually from the outside looking in, like that light bulb moment of like community being shared. Can you speak to that and how that felt?
Yeah, it was. So we did this event, and there were three young girls who were Latinas. And once they found out that my mom was from Costa Rica, they like came over and they were like, "Do you speak Spanish?" And they're like super excited. And we started speaking Spanish, and it was just like this connection, like right away, that was just super special. And yeah, it was just something really powerful.
Yeah, it was pretty profound. Just me looking in because I feel like I kind of experienced that too when we're in spaces with like African Americans, and similarly, like just being the only ones in that space, we're like, I see you,
Yeah,
like, and
for
having
sure.
that moment, and it was just like really cool for me to be able to see that. So, shout out to you for participating in that. That was a lot of fun.
Agreed. That's just like really profoundly speaks to the power of intersection,
Hmm.
and the commonalities that many of us share, whether that's affinity or identity, or even like spoken language, in which it can really like create adjacent, but also like really strong and powerful communities
Hmm.
that we can cultivate by just having one shared thing in common. I've lost track of like how many, friends that I've had that I just met in one space, and just as you kind of alluded
Yeah.
to, of just like locking eyes, and then like 10 years later, you're best friends kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's like so profound. And I'm sure like those girls are never going to forget that, just like the little things of spending, whether it was like 3 minutes or 30 minutes with them, just talking. It's all profound. So that's exceptional. And those are like the experiences that like change like perceptions and outcomes and experiences and trajectories for people. Whether they liked rock climbing at that moment or not, like
Hmm.
now they know you.
For sure.
Whether they really know you or not, they know this moment that they had with you, which transcends any like knowledge that they can acquire. So that's awesome. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So we're sitting in your home, which is pretty impactful for us that you
Yeah.
opened the door for us. Um, but as we like look around, I see what I envision the connection to outdoors being of like how you were introduced. But that's just from my vision. So how were you connected to the outdoors, and what's your outdoor story?
So, my dad has been a rock climber for over 30 years, and him and my mom, growing up with my two siblings and I, we would take road trips across the country. And, you know, I think the outdoors was always, well, we rock climb. So,
Hmm.
rock climbing drove everything. And I think the outdoors for me has been rock climbing a lot most of the time. And these road trips were always a source of like adventure, and it was a way to meet new people and to see new places. And climbing at that time was just kind of like on the side, for me. Um, it's funny because my two siblings and I, we talk about when we were little, we would do the trips were amazing, but sometimes we would get a little bit tired of climbing. My dad might not like to hear it, but we sometimes be like, why can't we go to the beach and do something like what all of our friends are doing? um, but climbing in general has, I mean, looking back on it, like even when I was little, even though it wasn't my passion, it has shaped us so much. And like being in the outdoors and just being able to share those experiences as a family and connect to nature has been incredibly powerful. But I think the past few years I've come into climbing like as my own person.
Hmm.
Before, I think it was more connected to my family. And I'm like so grateful to my parents and my dad for teaching me everything about climbing. But it's also exciting to see how that has transformed into my life now as my own. But yeah, I might have gotten a little sidetracked.
No.
But the outdoors has been like one of the biggest factors, along with like the bicultural childhood right now in my life. But
Yeah. So what has climbing been to you? Like, I think Derek can probably speak to it, and I can speak to it as well. Like, I find myself outdoors a lot, sometimes in a sense of like solitude, but sometimes as a professional slash personal challenge space of just like, I need that moment to challenge myself to grow a little bit. So what has it been for you? Has it been in combination? Like, where are you at now? What has it been the past 10 years, and what do you think it'll be in the future?
when I was younger, I think it was a way for us to be outside and like connect to nature, like I had said. But now I see it changing in different ways. I think right now climbing, it allows me to feel strong
Mm.
and allows me to completely embody like everything that I am. And so now I'm like looking forward and I want to use this thing that has, you know, just completely changed my life and use it for social purposes and like building community
Mm.
and taking it a step further and not just viewing it as like a hobby or something fun that I do.
Yeah, yeah. Derek, what has it been
For sure.
for you?
For sure. Yeah. And that, I, as we were, of course, spending time with you and your family today, Edison, I was like really struck by it. It just felt like expression, you know, and talking and you like setting the stage of your origin of being outdoors and being and climbing and even talking about the like ascension of like where it is for you now. It was like really striking, and we even talked about this as well, and Miles as well as we were watching you of just like it just felt so natural in terms of like expression. And I think that's like the highest compliment that we can like that I could ever give anyone, of just like it feeling so like free, as an expression of like who you are, and it not being confined, which you've even mentioned like that as from an identity standpoint. And it just seems so free as
Yeah,
we were there,
for sure.
as like again just the highest compliment that I could provide for you there. As it pertains to like, I mean my kind of experience, with being outdoors and utilizing recreation has been largely solitude. And as we were talking throughout today as well, we've spent great time together, which has been awesome. Um, but throughout our time, I was just like telling you all, as you know, some of my greatest ideas, have come from like 2 hour, 3 hour long runs, and some of the like strongest peace that I've found has just been like grappling, and wrestling, with ideas and concepts and thoughts over that like 2 or 3 hour long run where you just feel like stopping after 20 minutes kind of thing, which kind of like manifests itself in like many different ways. You know, after that run, perhaps after that climb for you, you just feel like at peace. You know, you can go in with like the strongest or the like hardest concept that you're grappling with or challenge that you're experiencing. And not to say that it's not present once you're done running or climbing or being active, but you just feel more equipped, because maybe you've thought about it in a different perspective, or maybe you've thought about that problem in a different world, in a different way, or something of that nature. But you just feel more equipped, whether you are or not. Maybe it's just refreshing, to just have a different perspective, or just to be have a minute, frankly, just to breathe, as it pertains to that. So very unique, and like just like painting the time that we had at Ascend was really really cool, really eye opening there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the line through with the problem too. That's
Thanks.
a
Thanks.
nice little
Thank
bow on
you.
the top. Um, yeah, while you're climbing, I mean, you've kind of referenced your experience this far. Like, how do you express yourself while climbing? Your true, authentic self and your full identity.
I feel like, so growing up climbing, I learned everything from my dad, and I have to give him all the props on that.
Go, Mike.
Yes.
Shout out to Mike.
um, and looking back on it, it's been interesting this past year because I grew up climbing with him and all of his friends, and so I learned a lot from them. But reflecting on it now, I think I never like truly saw myself in those spaces. And it wasn't until I went to Colombia and I was climbing all the time. And it was the first time where everyone who was climbing was speaking Spanish. And I mean, we were in Colombia, so everyone's from Latin America. And there was just this instant connection, and it just was so special, this like aspect of community. And when I first went down there, I wasn't even focused on, a lot of times with climbing, people will they want to reach like a certain level or they want to do a certain climb. And when I first went down there, I didn't care like what I climbed.
Mm.
I was just there because I wanted to meet the people and make friends and find community and learn more about the culture. And I realized like once I kind of let go of kind of like ego and all of like climbing accomplishments, I was able to really find this sense of community and find myself like
Mm.
in these other people, and I just connected on a whole other level, and I had never done that before. And I realized that like that was where I actually started growing as a climber. So when my own sense of identity grew and I felt kind of like more complete and more at home and didn't feel as much that sense of like who am I, or like
Yeah.
where do I belong, that I grew as a climber as well, and they occurred at the same time. So now whenever I climb, it's funny because with my one sibling, they're always like, before Elisa gets on the climb, we have to put some Spanish music on.
I love that. Let's go.
And so the one time we were climbing like a few months ago, and we put on the song, and Gigi was like, this is Colombia right here. We're like, and like just like hearing the Spanish, and so now I try to like really cultivate that like energy. I think in Latin America there's a much more community vibe, and I think in the US we're focused on the individual, and so I'm trying to cultivate that into the space that I'm in and how I like operate as a climber.
That's awesome. I love that.
That
I love everything about that, for
That is.
sure.
I agree.
I think we've had similar experiences as well. I mean, I can speak for me personally, just like learning how to ski. I learned how to ski in college, and it was just a very odd moment because we went to a university that just like honestly didn't have many underrepresented or BIPOC people in the space. And I was the only one learning how to ski at that point. I was like, yo, what am I doing for one? But like, what's going on? And I think kind of harnessing the skills back then was like really cool, but now I'm able to do that in community in a space that like allows me to be myself, like express myself through an activity and a modality that leans on that. Like I think of the intersections between snowboarding and like hip hop and R&B and how that's like now intersected through ride styles. Like people like, you know, Zeb and others that are considered like super aggressive when snowboarding, but it's just how we consider arts and integration within activities and recreation. So it's been really impactful on that. That's kind of how I represent myself now on the hill. Is like I don't wear monochromatic clothing. I don't do that now. It's like I kind of like express the upcoming generation of like fun, excitement, self-identity, self-representation, but also just the harnessing of skills that like I'm confident in myself to ski. I'm confident in myself to teach others how to ski, and pack 2 pair of skis so I can like show somebody else how to do it in the community, which I kind of sense from you as well with everything I've seen from you so far. Is like this is what I know, what I love, what I want to share, and I'm gonna do that every chance I get with somebody that's just like, you're Latinx, let's climb. Like, oh, this is cool.
Totally.
So it's like the same connection we have too. So
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I want to, quick aside, then I'll come back to you because I want to ask a quick question from you. Yeah, I mean, really just reiterating what everyone has said thus far, is like the vulnerability within those respective moments, you know, even as you alluded to, Elisa, where you just have that experience where you're like, things can feel overwhelming and consuming, for a multitude of reasons. And identifying that can go like far beyond this podcast, to be quite honest. But what I was just reading, and was able to attend a community session a couple of weeks ago, from Dr. Cornell West, and he said, "I'm not looking for allies. I'm looking for bandmates. You know, allies are those people that are there when you need them. Bandmates are those that are drumming alongside of you. You know, like if we're in a band, you're not my ally. We're in this band together. You know, like you're playing the guitar, I'm playing the drums, Marcus is on the bass. We're like playing together, not allies. You know, I think that's what the space needs a lot more of, are bandmates. You know, people to be on your team, when you're at whatever gym or area that you're climbing, to like cheer you on, you know, to be the drummer, so to speak, as opposed to like jumping in when you're in need, you know. The greatest way I think is to think of it as being proactive instead of reactive. You know, I'm sure like perhaps that vulnerable, you know, opportunity, I'm speculating, or like situation wouldn't have occurred if someone was proactively being your bandmate, you know, which is like profound, to think about that, especially as advocacy and like allies and things of that nature. It's like a buzzword right now. What we need are more bandmates. So with that in mind, I want to kick it over to you as like, how is that manifested in the community work that you're doing now? You know, that experience that you have now to all of the work in the community that you're doing, in addition to the trip that you have upcoming. How did that moment manifest to what you're doing now?
So I think I kind of want to. You were talking about something that like impacted you when were you reading or you came across at an event?
Reading and a seminar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whenever I was applying to Fulbright, uh, the application process was very long and you had to write different essays, and my dad was helping me with it, and he has studied English, and I was trying to go to Colombia. Well, I did go, but at this time I was applying. And so I was talking about teaching, and he had told me about Paulo Freire, and he viewed teaching as this bilateral relationship.
Hmm.
And so instead of having the teacher be someone who kind of just like gives all of this great wisdom, Freer imagined this space where the students were also a part of this production
Mm-hmm.
of like knowledge. And so that has like stuck with me. I've done a lot of teaching, and so obviously through that, but it stuck with me so much, and that's what I try to bring into every situation. And so that's what I try to bring into all the different community work that I'm doing and that I hope to do, is really create this space where people are learning from one another and growing, and just yeah, really trying to create this space where people are open to what they don't know.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of been my motto nowadays.
Yeah, that's extremely impactful, and it just brings up a lot of moments that I think of as well, of just the openness to approach is a very soft and sacred moment. Like, I've experienced it with students that I educate or just the community, where the vulnerability to say, I don't know, I need help, or like, I don't know, but I really want you to teach me, is such a impactful and important moment on both ends. Because for me, when I see someone that approaches me and says that, it's like we have something, like we have a bond. Because I mean, I think of myself as like a kid. Whenever I was a kid, I was like, I'll figure it out. Like, I don't need any help, I'll figure it out. But when I did reach out and say like, hey, can you teach me how to do this, or like confided in, someone that recreated with me, our grandfather, of like, hey, I just need help. Like, can you show me how to swing a tennis racket? Can you teach me how to volley? Can you teach me how to hit a golf club? Like, that was profound. And those are moments I'll never forget. So I'm sure, I mean, just referencing back to the students that were like speaking to you directly, like authentically, and had a profound experience and impact on seeing you climb, and was like, I want to climb more. Like, that's the moment that'll always come back to me, is like, those are incredible moments that I'm sure 20 years from now you'll still be referencing, like, man, that was like really impactful. And it's probably going to be the same on
Yeah.
their end, of like 20 years from now, they remember climbing with you, in a sacred space that you allowed them into, but also just hands on educated. It wasn't like I'm teaching 20 students. No, I'm teaching you two in this space. So I feel you. I get you on that.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, with the community work that you're doing, adjacently is a production of a film. Tell us a little bit about that.
The film has been my it, it's like been my whole life the past year, and I'm so excited about it. So I guess it goes back to Colombia. I met this great community, and the climbing community in Colombia is a lot smaller than the climbing community in the US. So you really got to know a lot of people, like the majority of the people. I was there for a year, so I really got to know them well. And when I was coming back to the US, I just felt this like uncertainty, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, or like what path what job, or I just didn't, there were lots of like external factors, and I just was like, I don't know what I want to do. And I heard about this program, the Scarpa Athlete Mentorship Program. Scarpa is the shoe brand.
Tell us more.
Scarpa's great. They make really good climbing shoes. And they started this program to help diversify the outdoors. And so there are about 20 of us in the program from different underrepresented communities. And we get paired up with professional athletes, and, you know, we work on a project throughout the whole year. And the project can really be anything you want it to be. So some people might say, oh, I want to climb like this one route. Or other people will go more down the community-based project route. And so coming off of the trip from Colombia, I knew I wanted to do something with the Latinx population, but I wasn't really sure what. And, you know, there are lots of different, like, I was thinking maybe I could do like a meetup night where, you know, I brought different people from the Latinx population to come climb, or bring people from, or like do a Zoom call and have professional athletes from Latin America talk to a certain group of people. But I just felt like everything had been maybe done before, and so I wanted to try to think outside of the box, but I couldn't nail down what I wanted to do. And in the summer last year, my dad and I were in Ten Sleep, Wyoming. I'm not sure if you heard of it. It's
Tell us more.
it's this
Give us more about that too.
it's this climbing
Please
spot.
do.
It's an amazing place to climb. And they had a climbing festival there. My favorite movie was Pretty Strong. That's what I said. And Pretty Strong is this movie that was made in 2020, and it featured like 5 or 6 different women climbers. And one of the women who made the film was at this festival, and she showed the last section of Pretty Strong. And the last section is of climber Ferry Rodriguez, who is from Mexico. And I literally, the first like 2 seconds that the movie started showing on the projector, I literally almost started crying. And it was so impactful to see a Latina woman climbing. And I was sitting there and I was like, why am I having so many emotions? And I was like, okay, well, I just came back from Colombia. Also, I feel like a connection to her. But also I realized in so many of the climbing films, most of the athletes are US athletes or European athletes. And we really don't see or talk about athletes from other countries. And especially, you don't really hear about Latin America. And that's where I decided to make a film showcasing Latina climbers, specifically Colombian climbers, and been working on the project this whole year.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm like excited to see it, like personally. I mean, representation matters, and the way in which it's being conveyed, it should be powerful. And I'm excited for you to convey your experience, and your video, in your movie in that capacity. How has, this journey of like pre-production, of from ideation to like packing your bags, frankly, at this point now, what's that journey been like, throughout this? I'm sure angst and a lot of like nervousness at this point in time, but what's been the journey?
It's been crazy. When I was sitting there, I was like, when I was watching that film, I was like, okay, I want to make a movie. And then like the next day, I remember I was like, I can't make a movie. I was like, I don't know anything about making movies. Like, how could I possibly do that? And so I dropped the idea for like 2 months. And then I kept trying to think of this project that I had to do for Scarpa. And just nothing was pulling me in. And I kept coming back to the movie. And I read my journal like a few months ago, and I wrote down, you have to make a movie. And so I like finally decided, I was like, okay, this is happening. Like, I am going to learn everything that I have to learn, and I'm going to make it. And I think in the beginning, at first, it was really overwhelming having to navigate the outdoor industry in a way that I never had done before.
Mhm.
You know, before it was more me going outside, having fun. But now it was like, okay, how am I going to get other people interested and like fund something? And so it was a switch in how I was viewing the outdoor industry. And so I was having to learn, you know, networking and how am I going to get these people to become like sponsors and help me with this project. And so yeah, at first it was very overwhelming. Um, but I have found a really great crew of people. And so that has been amazing. And we're all like very invested in this project. And I've learned so much from the project and just, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. Can you give a shout out to your crewmates?
Yeah, of course. So, the, my like partner in all of this is her name's Elisa Contreras, and she was born in Venezuela, but her dad is Colombian, so she's lived in Colombia the past few years. And when I first had the idea, I wanted her to appear in the film because she's a sponsored athlete. And then when I called her, she was like, "I love this," and she said, "You know, I want to like help you along the way. I don't want to just appear." So her and I have been in this from the very beginning, and we have found a crew of people, two filmmakers. One's from France, the other is from London, and another co-director. She's from Colombia. So we've all been working super hard on the whole project.
Yeah.
I love that you've had like your producer hat on. You went from like consumer of climbing to now like a producer of a film, circling climbing. So that's really exciting, and I'm like again can't wait to see it. Um, what's the objective? Let's dig into a little bit of the film. What do you hope to achieve? What's your message with sharing that far and wide via this vehicle of a video and film?
I have so many goals for the movie. Sometimes I'm like, I think I need to not have so many ideas. But main the main idea of the whole film, it's centered around identity. And I really wanted it to be around identity because I've seen how complex like my identity is and how I've like navigated that, and like I'm on this search to understand like who I am. And I think a lot of times people don't necessarily like think about their own identity. And you know, especially with like underrepresented communities, I think it's important to be able to have space for these communities to voice their realities. And so I think the one one of the objectives of the film is to give visibility to the climbers in Colombia and the climbing community and the culture. And then the other objective is here in the US. So when I started the project, I was thinking and trying to like think about how many sponsored Latinx climbers are there in the US. And there really aren't that many. And so when I started thinking about that, I was like, wow, like I need to do this because, you know, there's not a lot of representation here in the US. And so we need to have more role models. And so the role models can come like from Latin America, where all of us, you know, originate from in one way or another. And so that's another side of it. And I want to bridge the gap between the Latinx population in the US and then also in the people in Latin America. And then I think this also has become something. So one of the biggest like pushbacks that I've gotten with the film, which was frustrating to hear, and I've gotten it from people in the outdoor industry and professional climbers in the US, and they were telling me, you know, you might have trouble getting the project funded because it's not happening in the US. And that was frustrating to me because I was like, this is the problem. Like, I think a lot of times in the US, the US is so focused on only what's happening in the US, and there's not awareness of other people and other cultures. And so when I kept hearing that, for a second I was like, maybe I should switch my project. And then I was like, no, this is why I need to do this. And so I think lately, this whole idea of really growing the climbing community to go outside of the US and create this like worldwide community is what I really hope to do through the film.
And that's like such an interesting um, like rebuttal to climbing. I mean, it's a global sport. Like in parallel with any other kind of global sport. I mean, as it pertains to like outdoor recreation, whether it's skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking, cycling, those are like major global sports that people in the US go like outside, to hear more about. And conversely, it's a those that's such a unique like perspective for that to be like um, some like negative components or like drawbacks to the film there and the production of it. With that in mind, how can people support you? How can people contribute to your cause?
So, right now we're trying to spread awareness of the film. We have an Instagram page, and Alita and I have been also like ambassadors of the project. And yeah, really pushing out this message and trying to get people excited about it. And also, I hate like talking about money, and it's been stressful this past year because I'm like, how am I going to be able to get all of this? And um, we've come a long way, but we're still far from the goal, the complete budget. And what's amazing is our team, everyone's invested, and we want to make this a reality. So we're all taking a risk. And like, I'm not going to pay myself, and we're doing it because we love it, but we still need like to bring more money in. So we do have like a GoFundMe, and I also will, I mean, yeah, we're going to try to do different events throughout Pittsburgh, US to create community, and then also do fundraisers.
Well, one thing, GoFundMe.
Support.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're not gonna let that one go by.
for
GoFundMe
sure.
page will definitely
For
be
sure.
in the show notes, YouTube, all podcast platforms. So we'll definitely support in our best fashion. But yeah, definitely want to support our BIPOC creators in this space, affecting the next generation. So definitely.
Kudos. And kudos for being steadfast. I know this process has been so long and tedious as you've alluded to, and even at this stage with funding, you could have turned around at any point in time. Even especially like initially in the beginning, as I know, like the initial phase of any kind of project is challenging, and then adding an additional monetary and fiscal component to that. Kudos for being steadfast, because I mean that is like the easiest point in time to be like, you know what, never mind, never mind. That's like the easiest response for like
Sure.
any of this. And I'm like, even just like trivially, when I like pull out of my garage and there's like traffic at the like next stop sign, it's easy for me to be like, never mind, I'll just go back home.
Yeah.
So like to amplify that to this like major project that you're stewarding, kudos for being steadfast, and just how like impactful that's going to be by just following through, doing things. And we've even alluded to this today. I know we like said this numerous times, like just the act of doing is so critical. So thank you on behalf of like just like someone adjacently,
Mm-hmm.
in the community of climbing, if you would call me like adjacently being in it. But just like thank you. I'm excited to see like the product, and I'm excited to see all the people that you're going to inspire with this video. So we are absolutely going to continue to tell people
For
to
sure.
support and fund and contribute to the cause, because it's critical. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. And you've referenced a few things so far too about some stuff that you've learned to date, and it could be through climbing, but what have you learned through the film, just this process, like traits that you've learned about yourself that you're like, I didn't even know I had this in myself, or like the confidence that you've gained just by making it this far on the progress?
The first thing that comes to mind is earlier we were talking about being vulnerable.
Mm.
And actually, just like a week ago, we came up with the synopsis of the story. And one of the questions of the film is that we're trying to answer is like, when does vulnerability, like, when does it empower you and like allow you to find your identity? And that has like really stuck with me because I think one of the challenges with one of the amazing things and challenges of the film is that the production team, everyone is from a different country. So it is really cool and we all bring so many different perspectives. But also, I've seen that everyone comes at these topics of identity from very different backgrounds and
Mhm.
realities. And sometimes it's been a little hard because we have differing views and not everyone is on the same page with that. And for me, this concept of identity is at the heart of the whole project. And I I mean, I don't like confrontation. And so that's something that is that I know I need to work on. And so throughout the film, there have been times where it's shown me that like my opinion does matter and I need to be um like strong with myself. And yeah, it's shown me that like I'm I can be in these spaces
Mhm.
because sometimes I feel like there's this imposter syndrome where like I'm like, should I be doing this, or like am I the right one to be doing this? And so the film has shown me that like what I have to say and what I have to offer is like valuable, and I think that's really important for everyone. And just like this project, this whole idea of identity has shown me that everyone's stories, we all come from so many different backgrounds and realities, but at the end of the day, it's everyone's individual story. And so it's like real and it's true. And we can't take that away from like each individual.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I feel like you're changing not just like local climbing, but creating a new story in a new space for us, for like people that look like us. So say you're writing yourself a letter 10 years from now, like what is that letter going to entail that you were able to accomplish through the film, but also setting that trajectory for the next generation recreationally?
I think, I guess this also goes along with like what I want the climbing community to be. And I mean, obviously, I want to work to diversify the climbing community. Um, but I also think of it, I've just really come back to this idea of this international climbing community. And I think climbing really is a way to unite people, but it's not happening at the level that it could be. And I think that, you know, yeah, I think it could just climbing can be this tool for social change, and we're moving closer, but there's still like a long way to go. And so I hope to see the climbing community not just viewing climbing as this fun activity to like be outside, but really trying to view it as a way to understand people and understand people's realities and just, yeah, I really get to know people. This bilateral relationship that I had mentioned before.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Agreed. Climbing, this like the things that you were saying just like really struck me because I was just like thinking about like it's so funny how like someone can say something and like in a previous experience like pops into your head. So I was just like thinking, play course, which hang with me there. No pun intended. Um, in undergrad, and my instructor at that point in time, I'll never forget. She was like, climbing and your belay certification is going to allow you to communicate better than you ever have with someone, because you are the lifeline for someone, like holding someone on. And I think that's like strongly parallels to a lot of the work that you're talking about and mentioning there, i.e., just like communicating clearly and articulating. When you're belaying, you can't say, maybe I have you here, I don't know. Oh my gosh. You have to say, belay on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like you have to say, I'm here. Like I'm here with you.
Did we
Uh,
see that today? Or
no, we didn't, because no one fell. But no, but you have to like be firm with your communication, and you have to like convey like confidently and like strongly, like that you're there. And I think that's something that uh, can be transcended in so many different ways. I mean, frankly, from like you just being present in the space of climbing, saying, I'm here, like I'm here. Same of which for like the support system and the ecosystem that you have within the circles that you're working with. I'm like continuing to circle back to like the band as I'm talking about, but also like the learning system that you're talking about as well, with just like support and like communicating that and conveying that. And I think the ways in which you're cultivating that within the film, but also your community work, and even like your 10-year letter, of like the work that could be mentioned there, is all steeped in that, and with like communicating and saying, yes, you're here, yes, you belong
Mhm.
here, yes, I'm here, we're here together, which is like so critical with doing that, and really reiterates all the things that everyone's continued to say with like the propensity and the necessity for vulnerability,
Mhm.
which doesn't which is like the buzzword, of course, nowadays, and like a lot in leadership period. um, but that doesn't like relinquish any form of like power. It just draws people in. It brings them in, to articulate those needs that you have specifically. So that's exceptional. I hope your 10-year letter to yourself all comes to fruition here, more largely because the community is in need. And I think you're a great and incredible steward for drawing that forward. Yeah.
Definitely. So we're going to be wrapping up. Any parting questions that you would like to express yourself through? I do have a few parting questions, but anything that you'd like to express or touch on?
No, thank you for having
Uh,
me.
well, that's not it yet.
You're
Uh,
getting out of here.
yeah, we're not closing up shop quite yet. Any climbing associations that mean the most to you here in Pittsburgh that you want to give a shout out to? Again, you can say, "Nah, I don't have any. They're all great." But maybe there's an affinity to a few that you'd like to say what's up to.
Swapak is Swapak is it's our local climbing organization, and Swapak is continuing to, do this type of work of creating access and keeping the environment like alive and healthy, if we could say that. And so, yeah, check out the local climbing organizations wherever you are. And my dad, as I've mentioned him a lot, but he is my inspiration in climbing. So he has started this other organization called Climb Pittsburgh, and the goal is to bring climbing to cities. And I think that is another interesting thing about climbing. A lot of the best climbing places in the US are removed from cities.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, this goes to the idea of like who's climbing and who gets access to these spaces. So, the idea is to, bring climbing into the cities and help create community in climbing in cities. So, Climb Pittsburgh, SWAPAC, good
Shout out to them
organizations.
both. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Doing some really
Agreed.
killer work. Look forward to the next urban population having urban climbing initiatives, recreating the trends of what climbing looks like. So, for sure. throw in social handles where we can follow you, the film, where they can follow you. The GoFundMe page will be linked to the show notes, but how can people stay engaged with you?
So the film, I didn't even say what it was called. It's called Guerreras, which means women warriors. It's in Spanish. But it's Guerreras. And you can find that on Instagram. And then also Alita Contreras and Elisa Varlotta on Instagram.
On Insta. Good follow. All right, well, that is it. We're going to wrap up for today. Thanks again for spending some time with us. Sincerely yours outdoors with Marcus and Derek and Elisa Varlotta. It was a great conversation today. Look forward to catching you on the next episode. Peace.